I'll give a brief introduction for both very special guests. Sean Lim is the general manager at TianRun Asset Management. He has worked in real estate business for over a decade, and also with co-working spaces and startup clients for 4 years. And Kapil Kane here is the director of innovation at Intel China. And he's running an internal startup accelerator at Intel, which is super exciting, and we are going to hear a lot more from it. And Kapil has also helped launch many familiar products. He has helped launch and design the first multi-touch screen at Apple, an iPod, MacBook, and iPad. So welcome, guys. Can we get, yes.
Yeah, we share.
Okay. Yeah, I'll start with Kapil. So, Kapil, you run an internal startup accelerator at Intel and helping Intel to find inner talents. So talk to us more about that program. How is it going?
Yeah, we've been running this program called GrowthX for about 6 years now. It started as a way to enable and empower our internal employees who are entrepreneurial to realize their ideas and bring them to life. And as we moved along over the years, we started focusing on how to help commercialize this technical innovation. And so we created an accelerator, just like how there are startup accelerators outside. We have a similar concept of running batches, bringing projects in as a cohort and giving them all the resources that an external startup would get in terms of like seed funding, the methodology, the coaching, access to the community. And then our goal is to help them turn their technical ideas into something we can bring to the market. And so that's, in a nutshell, what we do.
So you said you've been running this program for 6 years, right?
Sure, yeah.
How was the first 2 years? Has anything been changed?
Yeah, a lot has changed. In the first couple of years, the kinds of innovations we're focusing on, were like building robots, drones, and things like that, where they seem very cool, but we couldn't really land them into the market in a timely fashion. And so we were also like this, the China, Intel in China is a more, I would say, like a customer-facing kind of an organization where we work with guys like Alibaba, Tencent, Lenovo. And what we also saw was that because of that, the customers were telling us what they would like to see. They would tell us that we like this product, but if you can change things in a different way, it could open a completely new market for us. And so we kind of shifted our innovations from going for those moonshots to something we call adjacent innovations, where we don't try to change or build a new chip. We try to use what we have and create new applications on top of that, which can bring value to our customers in a short term. And then we also started working with startups externally to help us test out our new product ideas, test out new markets, and again, with the goal of creating new business lines, growing Intel inorganically, and along with the ecosystem. So those are the kind of changes we saw initially, saying, okay, let's go big moonshots, to now looking at, driven more by revenues, more by growth, more by ecosystem. Yeah.
I like that. So it kind of changed from a huge moonshot projects to more practical and business-driven products.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Can you give us a few examples of the good programs and the interesting project that coming out of that accelerator?
Sure. You know, the very first market landing we had was a project we did with Jindong. And the way this happened is that we make desktop computers, and at the time the desktop sales were kind of like going down, and we were having this smart speaker coming up in the US, like with Amazon Alexa. So one of our innovating engineer, he came up with an idea saying, hey, let us add this functionality of a smart speaker to a desktop. And so that's how we got started, saying, okay, let's make our desktop a smart speaker. But as we brought them into our accelerator, we started going to the market, we found there's no such need. And that it's better we develop a smart speaker for the China market. Because at that time there was no, like the market was very new. And so we changed that direction and we created a smart speaker reference design from the ground up, which then JD.com picked up because there was a need for it. And we launched that product at CES in Las Vegas the next year. So that was our very first example of listening to the market, building something that the market wants rather than building something because we can, right? So that was one of the very first examples I'm still very proud of. That's when we started thinking more about what market wants, what customers want, then what kind of technologies we can create in a lab, right? There are more recent examples. A very simple example, we have something called an FPGA. It's a very specialized chip that can do certain kind of workloads very well. And we found an application in human genome sequencing where we worked with BGI, the Beijing Genomics Institute, to actually create and launch a product that helps them now sequence a genome from like, I think 10 hours to half an hour or something like that. So again, with small tweaks on top of our existing product, you can create real impact in the market, in the customer. So these are like a couple of examples I can give.
That's really cool. A smart speaker catered to the Chinese market. So Intel is a very big organization, and I'm wondering, how do you encourage workers and employees at Intel to kind of come up with ideas outside of their own work? Like it seems like they're taking on a lot. Can you talk to us about like the structure of the program?
Yeah. So just like Google, Intel has this culture where our engineers spend 15 to 20% of time tinkering in their labs, working on things they believe is beneficial for the company, and there are many labs even in China, Intel China, in like Beijing, like in Chaoyang, in Haidian, in Shanghai, Shenzhen, Chengdu, Dalian, and they're always building something and tinkering on something, and there are programs where they can get budget from their local sites to maybe like a $10,000, $15,000 to go build something. What we did was we came in and we gave them like even more resources to bring those smaller innovations that they developed locally to then putting like a business case around it. And when they get into our Growth Accelerator, they think it's a great achievement. So their business units, their managers are all supportive to let them spend at least 1 day per week. That's what we require to spend in our accelerator. The accelerator itself attracts between like 30 to 60 proposals every batch. So there's a lot of ideas being developed within Intel by innovators, and so there's never a shortage of ideas coming into the accelerator. And people, the employees, they do also grow from this experience. What we have seen is people who have gone through our accelerator have not just accelerated their innovations, but their careers as well. So for them, it's also a way of getting recognition, climbing up the corporate ladder. So it has those two advantages. So it kind of self-selects innovators to come in and innovate throughout the year. Yeah.
That's really cool. So Intel has the resources and the time to back these very important projects. I'm wondering, what is a good model for smaller businesses? Do you have any advice for smaller companies that also want to encourage their employees to find new ideas for businesses?
Yeah, I think absolutely. So I'm a big proponent of this entrepreneurship. That is, employees of any organization, big or small, using this entrepreneurial like techniques and practices to turn their idea into something big. And I think doesn't matter whether they're big or small. I think the key is to take that first step rather than just talking, doing something from the employee side. And from the organization side is to be able to give them a platform that their ideas are heard, their ideas are supported in a big way or a small way, doesn't matter. Whether it's like a investment of 5K or 50K, it depends on how big or small the idea is. But I think the key is to take that first step to get moving, and also to get some small wins to start with, rather than like what we did was 2 years of like trying to go after big things but not really landing anything, other than I would say being at the trade shows with some cool robots, talking robots, flying drones. But if you're able to get some even like a small like revenues or small market landings, that improves the morale. And I think that's a good way to start if you're a small company. Yeah.
So finding small wins along the way, that'll help a lot. Cool. So you talked about smaller companies, and I think that's where I want to turn the table to Sean. So Sean, you have worked in co-working spaces for many years, and I'm sure you're not a stranger to smaller companies and startups and the needs they often ask. So can you talk to us a little bit about what kind of questions and things that you have encountered from startups?
Sure. I get plenty of interesting questions all the time. The startup community is actually a very interesting community. They work odd hours. They work wee hours into the night. They're young. They're very energetic. That's why they have very different requests. So, off the top of my mind, I think one of the very interesting questions I get during my days in co-working is that, can I bring my pet lizard to the office? Can I have a beer in the afternoon? Stuff like that. We get very interesting questions like that. But on a more business perspective, I think if you underscore all the questions is flexibility. They are all looking for flexibility. So, for companies, they come in, they have a good idea, they want to bring it to market, but before they can do that, they put a project team together. And they need, depending on the progress, they need to scale it, and they need to scale it fast. So, as a space provider, how can we actually accommodate their growth, right? This is something that we always discuss internally, and try to create a product that's able to support the tech community, support the startup community, because they require that kind of flexibility to grow. They need to scale, they need to contract, just like that. So the product must be aligned with their requirements, with their needs. So that's something that we always try to talk to, better understand the client, what kind of product they need, what kind of challenges they face, and then we will go back and then we will readjust our products just to suit their requirements. So those are the main stuff that we are actually during co-working days. That's something of stuff that we're trying to support the community as well. Yeah.
So flexibility, that sounds like a very good thing for people to have, but it also sounds like a very difficult thing for providers to provide. So I'm curious, how do you manage to fill in the requirements for flexibility? How do you cater an environment that helps startups to grow and flourish?
So, while hearing what Kapil has spoke earlier on, there's a lot of uncertainty during the development phase, and there's a lot of vetting required during the development phase, right? So, couple of aspects that we, as a space provider, first of all, I think we need to really understand what the startup is doing, right? What the companies are doing, understand the challenges, understand their requirements, and then we will try to support them from an operational perspective. So if they work wee hours into the night, how can the space provider provide the very basic stuff, ACs, your air conditionings, your securities, your water supply, your power supply, all that stuff needs to be running because they need it, right? And then from a more business perspective, it's like if they have an idea and they want to bring it, before they want to bring it to market, they want to get some reaction from the market. Do we as a space provider make provision within the building itself for them to actually showcase their product? Or, just take for example, in my building in IFC, we have about 7,000 tenants coming through the building every day. Could that be a good sample size for startup companies to, connect them? And we run a lot of events as well. So, based on the needs of startups, based on the needs of these such companies, if they want to run an event within the building itself and to get a reaction from our tenants, from the general public, that's something we can facilitate. So those are a couple of stuff that we are trying to, we're continuing working on it and trying to actually create an ecosystem within the space so that, whether, they need funding, they need, get connected to investors, VCs and all that stuff, we can do it on a platform. If they need government support, we have connection with government support, and then we get them connected as well. So those are some stuff that we're trying to do.
That's really cool. So, Sean, you work with many companies in your work, and we're living in a world that has been quite different for the past 2 years. A lot of our life has changed, and a lot of things that we never thought that would be moving virtually, that has been moved virtually. So I wonder what kind of changes that you have observed from businesses in a post-pandemic world.
A lot, actually. So when the post-pandemic, is all about offline. A lot of people just, when they look at space, it's all about taking an office. Everybody have their workstations and all that stuff. And because of financial concerns, the density within the office is very high. So, you probably sitting back to back with, your colleagues. But post-pandemic, I think corporates are taking a more safe and approach to how they utilize space. So the density is not as high as previous time. But do that, then tech will have to kick in, right? Online meetings, work from home, how do we communicate, collaborate, offsites, and all that stuff is actually something that a lot of these corporates are actually thinking about and adopting right now. So some of these companies are like, a lot of our clients are thinking about, should we move our sales team away from the office? Because they need to be in the market anyway, so they need to be mobile. So they free up more space within the office itself, which means they can actually lower the density, and there's social distancing consideration involved as well. Some companies are actually, thinking about moving the R&D to a more decentralized locations, both economic concerns as well as for space. They want more space. Some companies are taking a more hybrid approach. So, it very much depending on the industry, and very much depends on how they are set up, right? So for R&D, so for example, we have Apple in our building. They are very, very cautious about safety, employee safety. So, we have engaged with them on a very, very regular basis on how they internally are managing the space, as well as what they're expecting from us as an asset manager to help them make their employees safer, So these are stuff, so it's constant engagement with our clients, understanding what they need, and then implementing that into our operations. And, you know, but back to your point, right? There's a lot going on right now, and it's so different from pre-pandemic. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, a lot have upended, but there's also a lot of good things coming out of it. So I think the two of you coming from very different spaces, but kind of also working towards the same goal. So I wonder if Sean or Kapil, you guys have any questions for each other that you would like to know?
Yeah, I think one thing, since you manage the space, right? What we have seen, like especially like since the pandemic, maybe I go to office maybe once a month. We are almost working from home. I see new models emerging in the market where restaurants are being, rented, not rented out, like tables in the restaurants are being now given as workspaces, like during like a non-lunch and non-dinner hours. And so do you think it's going to stay that way, that people are just going to be working from home, and we need to fundamentally change the way we think about our work, like workspace, whether it be corporate offices or be it co-working space? Do you think there's something fundamentally going to change?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question because we're just on the exercise in Q1 this year. So yes, there's a lot going on, like when you see restaurants or cafes activating space during off-peak hours to cater for work purposes. We are actually implementing that into our building. So what we're trying to do is basically we're going to activate a lot of unused space that was previously just common areas, right? To do that, we were working with our vendors. So we're working with a lot of our restaurant vendors, we're working with our cafe vendors, like, during off-peak hours, what are you doing with your space? Can you actually open up that space for our tenants to use? Because, they may have offsite, they may have meetings, then they rent out meeting rooms. So the space downstairs during our, food court or our staff canteen can be utilized as a meeting area. So, and then I was recently talking to a startup company who has a new product in the market. So phone booth, people are very used to phone booth, right? But they took that to another level. They created meeting booth, right? Meeting booth.
Is it Dominic's startup?
Panelists, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we know each other. Yeah, so I was talking to him. We used to be working in Naked Hub together, and we work.
Okay.
So he came up with this product. So I'm talking to his team right now in coming up with to put his product into our space. And it's very flexible because you just a week you can get the product in, and then if you want to move that office, the booth to somewhere else, then you can be moved just very easily overnight. So those are the stuff we are constantly trying to think about, and that engagement with startup companies help us to come up with better ideas to use the space.
So I'm familiar with Manoj, right? So yeah, we used to play together, and when he first, when Naked Hub was started, I used to tell him that you need to think more than just the space. Figure out what are the different services you can provide to the startups, and how you can get each other, like different startups to work with each other. And I think I saw Naked coming up with their apps where they were doing matching of startups as well. So a very interesting, time for both how corporates organize their offices versus, even the co-working space. We tried to get ourselves into Naked Hub, but there were too many restrictions from our info security, from IP, legal as well. So there are certain kind of functions you can move into the co-working space, but certain you just cannot. Right?
Yeah, the R&D space is tough. From big corporates, is getting into a shared space is tough because of security level. But like I mentioned earlier on, if like the sales team, the mobile team, those are actually easier, and they need that kind of space. And you're spot on, because what, so people like co-working spaces like Nickel Hub, WeWork, it's all about connecting the dots, right? So we have enterprises, we have startups coming in, and then how do we connect them to each other? And then as a service provider, how do we actually support their growth? So engaging with the government in terms of incentive, policies, business setups, all that stuff is very important. And we can translate the knowledge back to the startups community. And having connection and dialogue with big enterprises, because Intel is also reaching out to the startup community for ideas in collaboration and stuff like that. So we, as a platform, we hope to be able to more efficiently connect all these resources, and then hopefully help everybody grow.
Yeah, so that's why we run our accelerator in a co-working space. Yeah, nice. Yeah, so that our guys, our innovators can, like mingle with other people. They get inspired by what startups are doing, how fast they are moving. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I hope in the future everyone can work in a kind of a creative and inspirational hub, and that would make our lives and work lives so much more energetic, right? So yeah, I think we're kind of near the end of here, and I really, really want to thank you both for making the time and giving us your valuable insights. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, pleasure
Thank
being
you.
here. See you.